I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. Most leaders are trained to trust logic, data, and strategy. But what if that's only part of the picture? In this episode, I talk with executive coach and author Stephanie Trager about intuition, consciousness, identity, and the rise of what she calls the conscious futurist. This conversation explores how the stories we believe shape the future we create in leadership, business, and in life. So, Stephanie, it is nice to meet you all the way in New Jersey, former Bendite. Would you set the table for us? What are you working on right now? What are you all about? What's your work involved in?
Setting the table. Well, if you ask me to set the table, there's going to be a lot of people at the table because there's a lot of things, a lot of plates that I feel like I'm juggling at the moment. Let's see, where do you begin with that? For a long time, I've been coaching. I've had a coaching business since 2006. And so it's very interesting because what I'm working on personally is a transformation, like a transition, an identity shift, a reinvention. That's what I'm working on. And writing a book, I've been working on a book for like 4 years now, this one. And it is, it's shaping me and I'm shaping it while it's shaping me. But yeah, working on the reinvention. And when I mentioned, like, I've been coaching for so long and there's so much changing in the zeitgeist and in the word soup out there that I'm sort of in a moment of like, where's this all going to fall? Do you know what I mean? I don't identify as this anymore. What do I identify as? And so this is partially what this book is about. It's a new identifying, like the new organizing principles of reality are unfolding right now. And where are we going?
And what is the name of the book?
The name of the book is The Rise of the Conscious Futurist.
And we were talking before we hit the record button that this might be something that could be useful for organizations. If so, how?
The idea of a futurist, if we think, what is a futurist? And we think one might think of big names like Ray Kurzweil or Peter Thiel, right? There's like the popular futurists. And being a futurist is actually a profession, right? Big organizations, governments bring in those with sort of foresight, technology, processes, frameworks, scenario planning, horizon scanning, all the things. And then what happens in the corporate futurist language? There's 100-page reports on every industry about where the industry is going, what's going to happen. Seeing how organizations are relying on the intel that comes from these reports, right? And seeing how large conferences host voices that are kind of creating the narrative of where we're going. That is where, like, the corporate world goes. That's where organizations go. We're all kind of agreeing. We're in agreement. Oh, the future, they say this is where it's going. This is where all the trends are going. So a conscious futurist is, it took a while for me to realize in my journey, and maybe that's relevant here, but to realize in my journey that I'm a futurist. This is what I do. It's a different version and it's a different angle or octave that I'm tuning into and a different future that I see. And so how do we step back and discern the narratives, discern the trends, discern from these 100-page reports on every industry? Where is it coming from? What's their worldview? And what if that information was coming from a different worldview?
So if I could ask a follow-up to that, I mean, companies, I suppose, are definitely interested in understanding the market, understanding what they might call the environmental scan. They struggle with doing long-term strategic planning because they can't see beyond this quarter. But there's certainly people who study this from a very linear perspective, strategic planning experts and so forth, and economists. I was just heard one at a talk recently who were talking about what does he see. But what sort of I'm gathering that you use other skills than linear skills.
Yeah.
Like
Y-
you're a very spiritual, intuitive person that would not necessarily have I mean, your skills are not necessarily found in a typical corporate boardroom. So could you speak to that and how you bring those two different domains together towards being able to be a conscious futurist?
I've been coaching corporate C-suite executives for 20 years. So it's interesting that I might not be sitting in a boardroom, though they hire people like me, right? People like you. They hire. I'm the key corner woman behind the conversation. So not always. Sometimes I'll be in the room. Yeah, I have a background as a lawyer, so I also have a very linear analytical way of thinking. I'm still a lawyer. Gave me street cred. However, to your point, the conscious futurist is able to have like the intellectual analytical capacity to discern, what is the relevance of, say, the linear reports, and also to sort of expand perception about reality. Because based all of the reports of where we're going, or like I listen to economists all the time, and there's information like, yes, yes. And then I'm always looking for the pocket where it's like, and what if, and what if, and what is that based on? And what are the other possibilities? So where a conscious futurist, the skills of a conscious futurist, yeah, it's horizon scanning, not only from trends, not only from the linear, it is from the nonlinear. It is as we're like upgrading our human capacities on Earth, which it's happening, right? As we're upgrading our human capacities, our ability for astral travel or precognition. I've had in the linear and of linear times in my life where I was working in corporate litigation in Midtown Manhattan, the awakening, the awakening that I was going through at that time, the things I saw, the ways I understood things, the precognition. No, I completely wrote the entire 9/11 in my journal before it happened. Like, how do we actually access this capacity and work with it? Yeah,
No kidding.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's just pause for a second. So you've got some skills that are not normally identified in most people. Maybe we do have it
We do
and
have
we
it.
don't. That's a different topic. But
Yeah.
how do you access that kind of knowing, if you will, the kind of knowing that you were able to access information about 9/11 before it happened?
Mm.
What's your process for tapping into that level of consciousness?
Well, in the earlier days, it was there. I wasn't trying to do it, right? It was, you'd see it and then it would happen. You'd be like, oh, that's a thing, right? And that was happening for me from the time I was very young. And I actually kind of train people in this. We all have the capacity. We have so many more senses than the five senses. Like in ancient cultures, they know that there's more than five senses. Some cultures say there's 360 senses. Some say
Hmm.
there's 12 senses. Um, it's moving beyond the linear perception. So science, NASA's website, go to nasa.com or .org or whatever it is, we are perceiving 0.0035% of absolute reality in the visual bandwidth of perception. Have you heard that? That
Yes, I have. I have. Yeah.
Well, right? I mean, that's becoming a meme. And so what is the other 99.9%? We hear that over and over, though really letting it sink in. Is it, if that is true, what is the other 99.9%? So for listeners, what I'm doing is I'm taking my hand, if you take your hand and you put it over your eye, like make a little small thing, and you close your other eye, and then you like look through this peephole. That's all we're perceiving. So when we expand the aperture of perception about what we're able to perceive, there's so much more. And so how do we bring that into the conversation about what does the future look like?
So then how do you do that?
Oh,
How do you perceive
it's
beyond that little pinhole that you just described?
there's layers, there's layers. So think about a time where you used to see something one way, and then all of a sudden you saw it a different way because you did some personal growth, or you had a little bit more self-awareness. It really starts with honing the skills within ourself, right? And then bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger, and then becoming available. It's not trying to see something, right? It's being available to what is already presenting itself. How often do we actually do see things beyond, or we do have that capacity for precognition, and yet we shut it off, or intuition, and it's just a capacity to discern. What was that?
Well, I know that. So, as I told you before we started this conversation, that this show was once called The Business of Intuition, and I've been very
Yeah.
fascinated by that subject. And I think that over the years, I have made some very big decisions based on intuitive feelings. And I've had other people on this show talking about how intuition is how they access their own intuition. And there's a different process for that. But I guess I sometimes have had people say, I don't know the difference between my precognition or my intuition, call it what you will, or is that what I'm sensing, or am I just being paranoid, or am I just making this shit up? Or is this a trigger for something that I've been worried about and now I am projecting it into the screen of my mind in my life, and therefore I'm not going to pay attention to it because I'm trying to think about something more positive, especially if it's a precognition about something that is negative. So how do you help yourself, which I'm asking you to share this so
Yeah.
that we can learn from you, the difference between those two?
That is a great question. It is a question about knowing yourself, right? It begins with this like commitment to knowing yourself, because the more you know yourself, the more you know what are these nuances. Well, that's my left brain. Oh, that's my mind. Oh, those are my emotions making this decision, right? Oh, that's something else. So when we really go on this journey, so that's sort of modality that I'll walk people through in my one of my coaching processes. Though it's connecting to yourself. When you're connected to yourself, you know which voice is speaking. And
All
you can,
right. So
right?
this is interesting. You're
Yeah.
getting me going. Sorry for interrupting here.
Bring it.
Let me ask this. So if we accept the thought that we are not aware of most reality, down to a pinprick of you being able to see through your closed hand, as an example. And if reality is, again, much vaster, more vast than we can take on, then that would also be true for the self, would it not? Meaning that
Mm,
what we are is not necessarily what we think we are, that we have the normal self-awareness of who we are that is probably much narrower than we would say is real. So then my question then is, what is the self if the process is to know thyself so that you can access this information, this precognition? Then who am I?
good question. That's why we're on Earth. I believe that's why we're here, to really know who we are and what we're doing here. And that is such a
Then
big
how do
question.
you define that, Stephanie? What do you tell yourself?
It shifts as I'm on this journey of deeper gnosis, like self-knowing. That's like what is gnosis? Is the wisdom, it's the self-knowing. It's the journey of why we're here. So, example, um, identities. Right? I talk a lot about identities because I know personally I can have one identity. I'm a coach. I'm a this. Like we started off with, there's all these names and I don't identify. Who do you identify as? We identify ourselves with titles and roles and me, I, right? And then we go through our identity shifts where we change. Okay. Maybe you're expanding into something else, or you have this transition in your life and like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Who am I? And so we look for another identity. And now I land somewhere else and I know who I am and I know what my purpose is. Right. And so what happens when we expand beyond that? We are way beyond that, right? It doesn't mean that we have to negate all of that. That's our game. That's our game suit we get to play in here, right? The more we identify only in the game suit, that's where our suffering is. That's where self-doubt and not enough and all of the old programming comes from, right? So who are we if we're more than that? When we liberate ourselves from the names, the titles, and the roles, we're nature, we're Earth. If you go out into the space and you look at the planet, you don't see people, you see Earth. So we are Earth. We are Earth.
And does having that expanded view of oneself open a door for precognition?
I believe it does. I
Okay.
believe it does. I when I was a baby, I did have a near-death experience that I remembered. I
Huh.
remembered coming
How
back.
old were you? When you say a
17,
baby? 17
17.
months?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it wasn't like so I just grew up knowing that this isn't it. And I was questioning everything, though I was still a baby and I was still like who I was. And so I think it's important for to contextualize that having this expanded perception and this gnosis that there's more, that we are more, it doesn't negate being in the physical experience. It doesn't like make everything perfect, right? It's like holding both this and that.
What did you remember when you were 17 months or 18 months?
I experienced a pretty severe burn, and I remembered I don't remember the whole experience. I remember that like the moment of choosing to come back into the experience here. I don't remember there or here because I didn't have the context in like human
Mm.
brain of this or that. I just remember that coming, like choosing and knowing that I had to come back, and then knowing everything was like, huh? That's not it. Like, this isn't it. And
What do you
questioning.
mean this isn't it? What were you questioning?
Like, I grew up outside in a suburb of New York, and just the way I grew up and the kind of conditioning and materialism and um, everything I saw from racism to all of the issues. So
Hmm.
that led me into an earlier life of activism. I was a forest activist. Um, and this is an interesting experience of, I think it always came from that deeper seeking as a child, of always seeking like, this isn't it, that's not it, what is it? And so I left the East Coast when I was young, after college, and moved to California, and I saw the ancient redwood trees there, and I
Mm.
literally like I was like in and out of a deep thinker. I didn't grow up as a teenager knowing that I had gifts. I grew up unhappy. Like I was like, this isn't it. This sucks, you know? And so I was seeking, this cannot be it. When I moved out to California and I saw the ancient redwood trees, I heard, like I was pulled in and I went for a little hike by myself, and I heard them speak to me, and they said, "We need your help."
The
That would,
trees.
yeah, and that would have made no sense to my New
Right.
Yorkers. And I was like, huh?
Totally.
But I listened to the voice. I wasn't like, oh, that's just me making it up. I and it's not always like you're going to get the next step. It's being listening. Okay. And then I pulled out of that parking lot and I saw a giant truck with a big tree trunk on it. So I was like, huh? And I followed it. And then I pulled around the corner, and so we're being guided. We're tuning into just something a little bit bigger than it's just me here making my decisions, figuring this whole thing out by myself.
Hmm.
We open up to the listening. Of course, we're not talking about like spirit and God and all of the whatever else could be your higher, divine energy and power and intelligence. It's just listening and looking and being aware of the clues. So I pulled out and I followed the truck and saw that. And then that led me into the journey. But if I was not open to it, would I have seen that and followed and been guided where I
I'm
went?
struck by the 17-month-old you knowing that needed to come back. And then so much of your story up to this point has been to try to find it. Almost like that was your mission to come back, was to find it, whatever it
Mm,
might be, because you knew that there was something, there was a contrast. There wasn't, you know what life was like without it, at least for a
mm,
moment. At least there was even subconscious, where most people don't have that experience. I'm reminded of Saving Private Ryan, the very
mm,
end, where Tom Hanks says to Matt Damon, um, earn this. That was the line, because all of this was done to bring him back home.
mm.
And of course, at the very last scene of the movie, he goes to that person's gravesite and he says, "Have I been a good husband, a good person to his wife," and so forth. Of course, I'm crying my eyes out. This is just so moving. But there's something about the 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 gift, but also, quite frankly, I wonder for you, the burden of living up to the reason to come back. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Like you could have gone, nope, I'm still going this direction. I'm not
Mhm.
going to do that. But in so being told this or deciding that, I would think there must be some sort of heightened sense of responsibility to live up to this gift that is now life that you almost lost.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's an interesting way to frame it. It's an awareness that we are literally we're co-creating our reality. That's like common kind of transformational language these days, right? We're manifestors, we're creating. So
Yeah.
being so tuned into the like how quickly I get back like the order I place to the universe, whether I meant to or not. Like when you're just hyper aware. So intuition is it's really just awareness, right? It's awareness. I'd say the events of my journey were the events of the journey were I mean, just like all of our journeys, we're just learning how to be human here. And
Hmm.
we're learning what this is. I've spent many decades living with and visiting and learning from and right now I'm working closely with Indigenous communities all over the
Hmm.
place. And from the US, because of as a forest activist, as any activist, like that was my early in the 1990s. That was how you do. We work in solidarity with the local native people. And like right now I'm working very closely with communities in Colombia and to be in the close proximity to people who have a completely different worldview, a completely different paradigm of communication with reality and perspective of reality. And that has informed my journey because as I'm looking for, well, what is this and what is the truth? It's piecing together from, yeah, that makes more sense to me, and that makes more sense to me. And
Hmm.
yeah, and
So,
it reveals something about the future, and that's why I'm passionate about saying, "I don't know, that future that we keep being told about, that's not the only way. That's not the only future that's possible."
so what would, if you could imagine these indigenous people that you've been partnering with and working with, had an audience with a CEO of a normal business, what message would they give that CEO who has a worldview that's fairly typical in what we would expect? What would they teach them?
Oh, ways of listening,
Hmm.
ways of listening, and, that that very linear, do this, then this, and this, right? Or the expectation of do this, then get that causation, linear causation, A plus B equals C. That would be the first lesson, I think. That is only one possibility or way, is that serving the highest. And so then the question is, well, what is the highest and best good? Every indigenous culture, Native American, Congolese, from the Congo to the Amazon, is is a connection to nature. So is every CEO have nature
Hmm.
conscious futurist at their boardroom table.
Meaning like proverbially give that nature a chair at the table?
Yeah, a voice. A
Almost,
voice.
a voice, like, even though obviously it's a very esoteric concept, but we're gonna have this open chair be
Yeah.
called nature, for example.
Yeah. And not only as a
Interesting.
stakeholder, not only as a stakeholder, as a decision maker.
It's very interesting. It's such an important thing you're saying, and what I'm reminding myself of is the extreme pace by which people are putting out fires. Interesting that I use the word putting out fires relative to nature and trees.
Hmm.
That's interesting. But nonetheless, this hyper focus towards action, which then shuts down the ability to listen. And there's so much knowledge. That's what I'm sensing is there's a focus, but also by the more I was telling this to a group recently. I said, you guys are hyper focused on operations, which is in itself, it's a positive. But what's the flip side? What are you not focused on that you should be?
Yeah.
What are you not paying attention to? Where's the blind spot, which you can get into back to your conversation about blind spots are really huge if we are only aware of reality at a 0.000 whatever percent.
Huge.
We're walking our life as a primordial blind spot. So,
Good title for a book.
hey, there you go. That's book number 4. What about the vehicle by which we perceive these things is, of course, one could say listening, but it's also it's a listening that's aware of itself. So we could
Mm.
call that consciousness, right? So if I'm conscious, I can perceive. Um, is consciousness something created by the brain? Or is consciousness something that we live in, that's all around us, that we are participants of? Going
Mm.
back to how do we define self?
And this is the great inquiry we swim in and on the journey of this isn't it. This isn't it. Oh, that's closer to it. What if that 99.9% of everything that we're not perceiving, that we perceive as invisible nothingness, is actually intelligence? Like, what if the blackness we see in the sky is not the empty part of space, but in that it's just not visible to our in that 0.0035%. That every single every single thing we think is nothing is actually consciousness and has its own intelligence and has a whole other life form uh, happening, like plasma intelligence,
Mm.
the fourth state of matter. And when we really, like, what does this have to do with business and leadership? It's like, what are we ultimately doing all of this for?
And it's a great question. And I think my sense about other people, I love swimming in this space. I love talking to people like yourself. I don't necessarily come up with the answer, but I love the question, right? I love being
Mm,
able to explore this. I do think that there are some people who have a hard time not being able to get to the answer. So let's not ask the question,
yeah,
the
you know what I love,
grayness of it.
and I love that because so for 20 years I've been creating or like gathering frameworks, modalities that take that it's not like we don't have to leap from here to how do we leverage plasma intelligence at the next board meeting. like like what is the next step beyond between here and there? And it's the processes for expanding our perception. And there's one modality, one a workshop I used to lead, and I mean it's still kind of now it's combined in with other things, but it was called the inner work of impact. So I would love to kind of talk about words.
Make it
And
so. Do
I
so.
think
Go
what
for it.
yes, you mentioned fire when you said, right, the proverbial whatever you had mentioned the word fire, and we were
Firefighters putting out fire. Yes. Yes.
and so fascinating. I work with a tribe called the Kogi people, the Kogi, the Arawako. These are different tribes in the Sierra Nevada mountain range in Colombia, northern Colombia, and like listening to their words is a transmission. Like it changes your your biology and the way they perceive words is words are fire. There's good fire, there's bad fire. I mean, think about
Hmm.
it. Fire keeps us warm. Fire cooks our food. So there's good fire and there's bad fire. And how we use our word. Are you familiar with the 4 agreements, Don Miguel
Yeah.
Ruiz?
Yes.
Be impeccable with your word. That is one of the 4 agreements. And our word is creating our future. I'm talking about these corporate futurists with corporate reports and standing on a stage, and this is where we're going, and there's no turning back, and everyone believes it, and that's the narrative. And then we all agree, and then we all coagulate and collude with these premonitions of our future. And that's actually that's all we're doing, is we're creating a story and we're living into it. And so coming back from that, now that I've been tracking words since like 30 years ago. Something else you said before about what's the blind spot we're not seeing. So I always say this, like 30 years ago, I was this crazy person screaming. I'd come back to New York and I'd tell everyone about the ancient redwoods and, oh my God, and we have to save the redwoods. And they thought I was crazy. And I was yelling at everyone for not recycling. This is in 1996. And so the question I have now is, what are we not, that was 30 years ago. What are we not seeing now? Because everyone's awake to that. Now that's now common language, sustainability, climate, like all the words, regenerative this, these are the words that are now common. Impact.
True.
These are spaces, right? There's the impact spaces, professionals. Now, 30 years ago, this didn't exist. So what do we not know now that we're going to want to know in 30 years? That is what I always say, and you just spoke to that as well. What do we not know now that we're going to want to know in 30 years? That's the space of the conscious futurist, because it's assessing these unintended consequences of our noble solutions. Everything that we're doing to solve these problems, right? How do we know? How do we know where this is bringing us? And are we really being responsible enough? What is the framework we have to put in place for that? So coming back to the question about how does this, like, what's a tangible thing that someone can do that's like hearing this, but like, how does this apply to what I'm doing? It's connection. It's connecting more to ourselves. When we're feeling disconnected, what's our way to connect more with ourselves? And if we want to have an impact outside of ourselves, I always say the inner work of impact, right? We want to have an impact outside of ourselves. Well, notice how the outside is just this like holographic imprint of our internal landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fire, the negative, the fires that we have to put out. How much are we like on fire inside, in rage? How much do we express rage when we're in traffic? Where does war live in me? Where am I at war with myself? So it's that once we really start to play with that and see that, that's an expanded level of perception, right? We just, that's interesting.
Well, most people would say, wait a minute, the war in Iraq and what's going on with Ukraine and all the other things that are happening in the world right now that feels pretty egregious and scary and violent. How can I possibly say that there is a reflection of that inside of me? Which I do believe there is that connectivity. I don't know exactly how it works, but I'm open to that concept. But I bet a lot of people would say that's just BS, and it's a different worldview when it's kind of an us-them approach. It's what the external world is doing to me, and I have to be reactive to it, hence put out fires with the former kind of reference that I made. But it is interesting that the thought that I have when you're talking is that, or maybe it's a question, and I have my own answer, but I think it's probably self-evident based on this conversation, that some people would say, are we having a human experience that happens to include spirituality, or are we spiritual beings having a human experience?
What if it's both?
I think you're right. I think it is both. But in a world of wanting absolutes, in a brain that likes to get things right, having both doesn't feel like a satisfying answer. Or if this is how I think about it sometimes, Stephanie. If I think that I'm in charge of everything that takes place in my life, I am ultimately responsible, which I was very much brought up to believe that. And I still slip into that kind of idea that the results that I get are because of me and my efforts, my creativity, my energy, whatever. And the things that don't go the way I want, I can say, well, what did I do that may have caused that? So it's very me-centric.
Yeah.
When I break from that mindset, that pattern, that all of this is happening together on a much larger scale, and there is a consciousness and a connection that maybe to my higher self that goes beyond this physical body. All of a sudden, I don't feel so, stressed that I have to figure this all out. I have help. I have
Yeah.
help in other people. I have help with conscious thinking. I have help from a higher self. All those other things are possible. And then I can relax a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's still about you, right? It's still about
I
me.
can relax a little bit. Right. No,
Right?
the sense of I is so interesting, back to
Yeah.
your sense of language and how we create worlds based on words.
Yeah. I call this story spelling our world into being. We're spelling. We
Stories
spell.
spelling our words into being.
How do we write words? We spell them. What do we do
That's
with,
great.
what do we do with magic? We cast spells. There's a whole
Oh,
like deep
I
dive.
get
You
it.
can go on the etymology of words. Okay. It's in the word like the energetic magic around words. We are spelling. I mean, think about it. How many times in the last 10 years, or let's say the last 3 years with AI, we're going in this direction and there's nothing you can do about it. It's
Right,
happening and there's no turning back. I mean,
right.
you will see this everywhere now, whoever's listening. How many times maybe somebody even said it. And I always hear that. I'm like, oh, yeah, there is something we could do about it because I see a whole different thing over here. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
everyone, what if this is possible too? And it's a function of expanding our perception. So in that linear, this is where we're going. It's just easy. It's easier to say, okay, that's where we're going. They said so. Who's they? They said so. And so noticing where, like, how are we being influenced? This is a whole other part of this, going back to the original question. Who am I? What's intuition? How do I know the difference? It comes down to influence, right? Like, what's influencing me? What am I influencing? And when we start to become aware, that's pretty linear, like exercise you can play with. What's
Yeah.
influencing me? And any moment, tap into how you feel, and you can say, you think it's you and you just think you're in your head. What's influencing you right now? What are you influencing right now? Right? What is, and we might want to say, oh, I had a fight with my spouse this morning. That's influencing me. Or I got this memo from the team. Yeah. And what is the moon doing? The moon moves the ocean. You think the moon isn't affecting us? The planets, this orbit, if we really zoom out, that's another perceptual leap. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when we really look at, well, the magnetic field around the planet is thinning, and the sun is, people think, oh, it's just getting hotter, as there's more energy from the sun. Maybe the sun is a living, intelligent, conscious being, and it's beaming intelligence to the planet. I'm not saying yes or no. What
Mm-hmm.
if, So when we're like, what am I influenced by? So much more is happening in the invisible. And when we're open to that, it's like, to your point, it's less my fault. It's less this small thing. And I could still be human and be pissed off at the thing. And also at the same time, no. So it's not this or, it's this and. That's that holding duality thing. It's like, how can we be in our human experience without making it wrong, and also know that there's so much more happening in the invisible?
There's also a conscious choice to be going down this path that you're talking about. You mentioned that you had a journal entry that predicted or mapped out what happened with 9/11 before it actually happened. I've used writing as a vehicle for this kind of self-awareness and consciousness and listening and everything else that we've been talking about. But if I am listening to this conversation and I'm going, okay, this is way out there, Dean
Yeah.
and Stephanie, but I'm intrigued. We are living in a physical world. We do have deadlines and kids that need
Yeah.
to go to school and bills to pay and, orthodontics visits and all that kind of stuff. But it's almost like the commitment to creating the space for this is where it at least can start. So
Mm.
what are some rituals, if you will, going back to your Indigenous reference, that one could establish for themselves to take this journey that you are suggesting is
Mhm.
open for them?
I think the best place to start is with identity. Like really, because it's so linear and like clear, right? It's like how do you identify yourself? And then you can journal and write or think or talk into your whatever, your phone or your, AI thing. No, no, don't do that. Um, though, yeah, so many reasons. Really assessing and doing an identity evaluation and
Mm,
notice like whatever choices and decisions because it always comes down to choice and decision, right? Whenever we're feeling stressed or we have all these things to do and we might feel I actually wrote an email this morning to my community about this and I think this is very specifically it applies and it's around reinvention and I'm going through a reinvention so I'm really in this right now and I'm thinking about identity reinvention and transitions. Now, there's the
mm,
transitions that we all accept, right? Like if you are having a child, or you're getting divorced, or you're getting married, or you're unwell, or your job is changing, or whatever those transitions that are, or you're moving house, those are accepted. Like you can take a day off for that. Though the other transitions, like the emotional nudge that you need to focus on something inside. That's a transition, like giving ourselves permission that knowing that you want to make a shift or you feel like you're on a plateau, that's a transition. Like giving ourselves permission to really like tap into the subtle transitions and in there evaluate like, oh, I want to go, something's changing and we're going to go from here to there and I don't want that same identity when I'm there. How do I go through this identity shift? Well, it's like really understanding how do you limit yourself, your true self, like who you really are? Because we're talking about the exploration of who am I and what am I here to do? Like in the bigger meta picture, coming down to the granular, it's like, well, how are you identifying now? What are all the roles that define you now? How how are you showing up to meet everyone else's expectation of you? How does that feel? Does it feel
mm,
limiting? Okay, well, if you could be whoever you are, if you could literally slay the shame, because we all got that, right? It's a lot of the time the shame that holds us into the old program. What would that look like? And so start exploring who is this like radical you that would be totally liberated if you could be. Don't have to do it, but just starting to play with that. Like what version of you that exists outside of that 0.0035%?
and it sounds like this is a bilateral kind of, exploration, that there's information that you could be seeking, and there's information that wants to seek you, but there
Mm,
needs to be a
love it.
space to open that up.
Love that. Yeah. Yeah.
This is really interesting. Well, talk about the books you've got, the work you do, how people who are captivated by what you're saying could reach out and find out more.
Hmm. Thank you, Dean.
Mm.
I was just actually absorbing what you just said about the bilateral, and and
Oh,
and so yeah, an, a plug for taking time and space, right? We take space for the acceptable transitions, and so yeah, taking what does taking space look for you in this in an identity shift? So yeah, people can find me at stephanietrager.com. So my website. And I have written a few books that have not been published yet. I'm working on The Conscious Futurist right now. This one is taking precedent and probably will be out early to mid 2027. Um, yeah. So
and that's the one, the
the
name
conscious,
again.
the rise of the conscious futurist.
It's really an interesting title. It sounds like
What
a
is
movement. I know you're very, very keen on words.
it
Yeah,
is a movement. It is a movement. And when I feel oftentimes it's easier to create things that already exist, and
yeah.
it's, a little scarier to create things that don't exist yet. So if anyone's listening and they're like, yeah, create it, I could use the hearing on.
We'll write the book and then we'll read it.
All right. Writing it. Come find me also on YouTube. We do also have a YouTube channel and have
Okay.
some wild minds there.
Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, it's 11 o'clock here on the West Coast, and it's a great way to um, kind of reset my day.
Mm.
It really has. It's been a nice journey with you on this conversation. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Me too. I really enjoyed this connection with you and Bend. And
Yes.
ooh, there's some wild energy at Bend, I'll have to say. Tell you about that
Well,
sometime.
we just did a hike last weekend with some friends that came up from Phoenix, and we found these two waterfalls not that far from each other. And just the sound of water moving that fast in the forests that are ancient, you just cannot not be washed over by that energy and be affected by it. I mean, that's why you drive an hour and a half to get there. And
Mm,
that is why we moved here. But it's just we spend evenings outside under the stars, under with our fireplace and our dogs in our laps. It's like it reconnects us to something much bigger than ourselves, and that's been, I think, I know the reason why we decided to reside here.
mhm,
Yeah.
mm.
Well, good to talk to you. Thank you
Thank
so much for your
you.
time.
Thank you, Dean. Very grateful.
If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to rate and review our show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps more people discover Leadervation and this kind of conversation. And if you're looking to strengthen leadership, culture, or team performance in your organization, you can learn more about working with me and Mission Facilitators International at mfileadership.com.